Good evening, treasure hunters. This is Blake coming to you live from New Mexico, and joining me, as always, from Washington State, it's Bryn and Cody. How's it going?
Good evening. We are doing well.
I'm doing well. Yeah,
Good.
we got some initial feedback on our first episode from my family.
Oh,
They
okay.
say that you have a beautiful voice, Blake.
Oh, really?
A rich baritone. I got a little jealous. I got a little jealous and was practicing some voices before the podcast. It's not gonna work. I'm just gonna have to stick with my original one.
Okay, what a fine compliment, I suppose. Welcome everyone. This is the There's Treasure Inside, the Unofficial podcast. This podcast is covering content from the newly released book in November 2024, There's Treasure Inside by Jon Collins-Black. I think this episode we're going to be talking about chapter 2 of the book in one of our later segments, and I think we'll just kick off with our normal series of segments, starting out with news. Cody, do you want to kick us off with news first?
Sure, yeah. I just wanted to touch on something real quick. I'm not sure if we've already touched on it before, but I think if we did, it's worth rehashing. It'll save some people a lot of time potentially. Jon Collins-Black has said that he had a very few number of people editing this book, so that he just had more control over everything and didn't have information getting out. Because of that, it is liable to potentially have some typos in it. He has said if you find a typo, you're supposed to email him, and he will post on his website that a typo is a typo. As a way of confirming that if you find something and you're like, hey, is this a typo, or is this potentially purposely misspelled as part of a hint or part of a clue, it's a way to verify that. And I've already found something particularly interesting related to that, where there's a couple instances of maybe page numbers being labeled incorrectly, but only one of them is listed on his website as a typo.
Ooh, interesting. Yes. Okay. So you're on the page number hunt right now.
Oh yeah.
Something that you noticed. All right. Good. Yeah. So as folks find typos in the book, as Cody said, you can send them to JCB, and he will record those on his website, so we know that they're accidental and not meant to be a clue for any of the treasures. My piece of news to report is supposedly, according to some of the Discord communities we're a part of, new books have been shipping actually starting today. So near the middle of December, it seems like new books are shipping out for people that had ordered them a week or two ago. So this is great news because, initially when people came across the book shortage and started ordering in large numbers, it sounded like maybe books weren't going to be available till January. And so it seems like that's been accelerated quite a bit, if new copies of the book are now being sent out early December. So that's kind of the only piece of news I have for today. I don't know. I think that might be it for us. Shall we get into the Horseshoes and Hand Grenades section of the podcast? Yeah. I think, Bryn, you're leading that today. So remind us what the Horseshoes and Hand Grenades section of the podcast is about.
Yeah, so this segment is focusing on where we thought we were onto something, and then as soon as maybe not as soon, we later on got deeper into this potential solution, only to realize that it's probably a dead end, and the hope and excitement that we had is not valid. So I
Because
would
the
say
excitement's always valid.
Because you got close, but no
well,
cigar. Maybe it
Close
should
but
be
no
called
cigar.
Close But No Cigar segment. No, Horseshoes and Hand Grenades. It's too late now.
We're committed. So I will start by saying that this is something that I thought was excellent, an excellent little tidbit that I found in the book, and I sent it to our group chat, and Blake responded with a ha ha a few hours later. And I told Cody, surely he meant to put an exclamation mark, not a ha ha. So I called Blake later. He confirmed it was a ha ha and it was not a slip of the thumb. So at that point, I realized, okay, maybe this is something I need to let go and not continue to pursue. So,
Yeah,
I
just to
think
defend myself a little bit here. I was at work, so I didn't have my phone. So when I got back, there was a lot of messages, right? And so I started scrolling from bottom to top. And so the first thing I saw was the picture that you had listed there. So I didn't know any context. And to me, it seemed like a funny one. So I put a ha ha, and then I kind of read the rest of the chain that it was a serious solve, and then I felt bad, but it was too late, and so I clarified later when you called me, Bryn. But I apologize. But that was my gut reaction. Sorry.
it's okay. And maybe it'll inspire someone to pursue it a different way. We'll see.
That's right. Very good.
So the three of us out of the gate, I feel like we've been pretty focused on the past and future box. And I think initially I was going down quite a few rabbit holes on very specific details and just getting lost in that confirmation bias and not getting where I ultimately needed to go. And so I started looking at what some other people's approaches were, and I felt like, okay, these other solves are really utilizing the book a lot more. I've pretty much strayed away from the book at this point, at least like referencing it as a physical tool and just kind of getting back to the basics of what he's providing for us to use as material in the chapter itself. So I had seen I'd seen how people were using the lines. So each treasure comes with like a commemorative coin, and all of these coins have like lines on them, lines with an intersection. And so everybody's trying to decipher what do these lines mean? How does it play into the clues? And that a lot of people I'm sure are familiar with in the past and future box, these lines appear to be the intersection of like Nevada, California, and the intersection would be Lake Tahoe. So I was looking at how these lines could be applied other ways. And on the page, so if you have the book, page 223, the commemorative coin is up top and it has the angle. I can't remember what the angle was, but anyways, the Bitcoin itself. So the Bitcoin is one of the treasures included in this past and future box. Is directly below it. So I'm kind of just looking at it. And I thought, interesting, these lines look like they also line up with the wedge chunks of the Bitcoin. Do you have a visual handy, Blake?
Yeah, I can pull up the visual. Yeah, so the important note here is that it's a physical Bitcoin. I don't know how to pronounce it exactly.
Correct, thank you.
Casacious coin. So there's a casacious coin in the past and future box. We're assuming because there's an image, a photograph of it in the past and future box chapter. And so yeah, you're referencing the commemorative coin against the Bitcoin, physical Bitcoin design. Is that correct? Yeah, let me pull up a picture of that for everybody. 1 second.
Awesome. And so essentially, through my confirmation bias, okay, so you can see here the lines do line up on the wedges of the physical Bitcoin. So I certainly thought I was onto something here. With the intersection, if you then lay the coins like directly on top of each other, it's just going to be in like the line of the B. It's between these two negative spaces of the B. And at that point, I was pretty set it was going to be between like a couple boulders or something like that. So I was so sure I was onto something, only to be shot down by Blake's haha. But at the same time, at least it got me to a point where I was like using the book and the more physical aspect of that versus getting lost on the internet and all these corners that weren't necessarily getting me anywhere either. So was it a coincidence? Most likely, yes. But the fact that it did line up was a little bit of a thrill in the moment.
All right.
And you're saying, just to clarify, you're saying that those two lines on the commemorative coin line up with that gray and black, the gray and black segments of the Bitcoin?
Yeah. So like the dividing lines of the coin.
Like the exact same angle, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. See, are you now
Maybe,
reassessing?
are you really willing to give away this information on the podcast?
I know,
You
edit
wanna
this
hold on to
out.
it?
I don't appreciate the mocking, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, something to take away from this image.
Blake's the bad guy in this story.
Watch this be part of the solve, and joke's on you.
Yeah, joke's on us.
It's good. It's good that it regrounded you in the book, because yeah, I was with you on the going down Wikipedia reference to Wikipedia reference to Wikipedia reference. You can't remember where you started anymore.
Yeah.
But something to note before I pull this picture down is looks like the circle on the commemorative coin where the intersection is not centered, right? So it's off center on the commemorative coin. You can see how you had to force that line up. So that is something new, actually. I never really had noticed before.
So no.
The
angle is great. I agree that the angle is great.
Aligns.
Yeah.
And then if you overlap the coins directly on top of each other, so no longer forcing the angle.
Yes.
More to that later in the podcast.
Okay. So you guys are way ahead of the curve on this. Sorry. That's the first time I've noticed that. Okay. All right.
Anyways.
Very good. So that's your horseshoes and hand grenades moment of the day.
Correct.
All right. Very good. Sorry, I laughed. It's a very good solve.
Okay. As long as no one else comes at me for that one.
Would you like to issue a public apology on this platform, Blake?
Not yet. Not unless the treasure is found with that clue. At that point, I will issue a public apology and send you $10 via PayPal for an apology.
I'll accept
for missing
Bitcoin's
out.
payment.
No.
Thank
you. Okay. Shall we move on to our Discord detective segment?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, I'm going to be leading Discord detective segment today. Again, it's going to be focused on the past and future box. I apologize. We all apologize, and we've had a discussion that we'll do more segments on different boxes during our Discord detectives and other segments. So not everything that we are talking about personally is going to be focused on the past and future box, even though that's where obviously we've been spending a lot of our effort. So yeah, we'll try to.
A lot of people have. It's a very it's packed with puzzles.
Yes. So anyway, we'll try to be a little more distributed in terms of information that we're providing from the other boxes as well. I think as we assume, some of the smaller treasure boxes are probably going to be found first. These are the ones that are contained in self-contained chapters in part 2 of the book, where part 1 of the book is really focused on the lion's share, the largest treasure. But that's obviously we're assuming it's a much more complex puzzle because of the amount of information contained in 23 chapters of the part 1 of the book that contain the information that will lead you to that treasure versus the individual chapters in part 2, where one chapter corresponds to a single treasure box. So anyway, full disclaimer there. So yeah, I wanted to cover some potential solve that one of the more, I would say probably one of the more prominent treasure hunters in the community that goes by the moniker K-Pro has reported. And there's a YouTube video about this if you want more information. I'll just kind of summarize it in this segment here, but we'll post a link to that YouTube video that has the visuals and the full explain associated with it by Kpro herself. But I wanted to cover it in this podcast in case people weren't tracking that. So this solve relates back to a solve that points to Lake Tahoe as the region of interest for searching. And one of the interesting things about this solve is that Kpro herself went boots on the ground to actually search this area and try to find more clues that would align with the past and future box word search and other contents of that chapter, to see if they could find, more information about confirming this is the location. So Lake Tahoe is one of the more popular solves, I would say, right now, for a number of reasons, and that's what I want to cover today. So I think the first piece of information that this solve involves is the commemorative coin, which we are now very familiar with. So thanks for the setup on that, Bryn. Looking at the commemorative coin angles, that angle lines up very, very closely with the bend of the state borders.
State line.
The state line between California and Nevada, right? Where that, you can kind of picture Nevada in your head that has that little elbow that leads down to the southern part of the state. And so the border between California and Nevada, when you line up the commemorative coin over, let's say, a Google map or any map, that angle aligns very closely to what the actual state line angle looks like. So that was the first piece of information. The commemorative coin angle also aligns a bit closely with the two instances of the word state in the word search. So there's one instance of state that's horizontal spelled out and one instance of state that's a diagonal going down. And so also if you line up the commemorative coin angle, it's not as exact, but it's approximately the same. So again, if two instances of the word state in the word search line up with that angle, that would be evidence towards you're on the right track with looking at that angle between the state lines. Another piece of evidence that Kpro reports, which I think is a good one, all these are great, but another particularly good one is how do we use the word lemon in the word search? And so her argument is that California actually is the biggest producer of lemons in the United States. And so, again, another piece of evidence directly from a word search word that might associate with California as a hint. One of the clues that I had pointed out also got covered by Kpro. This is one that I had pointed out in our group text, is the mention of a state of gold as a phrase that was in the introduction of the chapter for the past and future box. So again, another keys of evidence pointing towards California, which is obviously the Golden State is the nickname. That seemed like a very, pointed clue towards maybe California being a part of this. And so Kpro mentions that in her solve as well. There's some rail lines that are around Lake Tahoe, and she even had a picture of a rail line that goes into the lake. Obviously if you don't have the book or haven't looked at the word search, it's not obvious, but rail and line are both words that have been found in the word search. And so trying to fit those together. There's some argument that, rail, because it's backwards in the word search, actually spells out liar, but to me, I like the rail better. Liar doesn't quite fit, the theme or the overall concept of the puzzle that well to me, but that's to be determined. Another word in the word search is sapphire. That one's very clear at the bottom right of the word search. Lake Tahoe has been called the sapphire jewel of the Sierra. And so that's a known nickname for Lake Tahoe, which includes sapphire. I think in my opinion, one of the more stretched solve parts of the solve relates to part of the content of the chapter, which talked about JCB's grandparents tallying vehicles as they drove by. And so there is a bunch of car tallying cameras or instruments, we're not quite sure, that Cape Crow had pointed out as being around Lake Tahoe to look at traffic and things like that. She found quite a few, multiple dozen, I think, mapped out around Lake Tahoe. I don't know how unique that is to Lake Tahoe, so it's hard to say if that's a good clue or not. So I'm a little skeptical of that one. In that same passage talking about tallying cars, there's another phrase about basking in the heavens. And so there is a ski resort near Lake Tahoe called Heavenly Ski Area. So that was another part of this solve. And then again, another stretch in my opinion, but there are multiple instances of Tahoe being found in the word search, but not using traditional word search means. Instead of like having a straight line, a diagonal, vertical, or horizontal line, it's kind of a zigzag. So the letters are connected, but they're not in a straight line. And so I think there's 3 or 4 instances that have been found of Tahoe being in the word search. I think one of the problems there is that those are common letters. And so just by random chance and by using kind of a more abstract method of finding the word, it seems like it's pretty reasonable that you would find that by chance with a lot of different words. And so anyway, I don't think that's the strongest part of the solve, but it's reported nonetheless. Anyway, that's the summary I have for the K-Pro's solve to Lake Tahoe. Again, she went boots on the ground because of all that evidence lining up. The treasure's not been found yet, allegedly. And as we reported last time, JCB, Jon Collins-Black, also has said that he's highly confident that none of the treasures have been found yet. So anyway, just wanted to report on kind of some of the details and strongest evidence towards the Lake Tahoe solve right now with that Discord Detectives segment. Any questions?
I got a question. Go ahead, Bryn.
No, I don't have a question. You go.
Okay. My question is, what's your gut feeling, Blake and Bryn, on this solve? Do you think it's high probability that it's correct, low probability that it's correct? What's your gut telling you, or not your gut? What's your logic telling you? Either one.
Yeah, I think my gut says I like the solve personally. I think it's pretty interesting. I think still there's a lot of words that need to be figured out with that. And K-Pro did say she has other evidence that she didn't want to report because it was a little bit more related to more words. She was kind of giving the wave tops, let's say. So there might be more better parts of this solve. But yeah, my gut reaction says it's probably still pretty low probability. It doesn't, as you guys have mentioned a lot in the last couple of episodes, doesn't really fit necessarily with the theme of the chapter of past and future. I haven't seen those connections made. So I think it might be somewhat of a coincidence. Just my opinion.
Not a Tahoe believer yet, huh? How about you, Bryn?
I watched the video, and I'll say as I watched it, I got excited about it. It felt like she had some good points, and they were good points. But I think ultimately, when I stopped watching, took a step back and thought through the way that we've been approaching the puzzle and some of the things that we've identified as being pretty critically important to a solve, weren't applied at all to these solves at all. So I think, like Blake was saying, they seem to be a lot of coincidence, I would say. Maybe some confirmation bias thrown in there, but I think ultimately the solves don't align with the material of the chapter outside of the word search, and just the theme and the cultural references that he makes in the book as well. So the movies and the books, the games that he's referencing in the chapter don't tie into the solve whatsoever. So I don't think, based off that alone, I could believe Lake Tahoe is the solve based on this evidence. And like said, she says she has other evidence as well. Maybe that ties it all together. Who knows?
Yeah, I think thinking about what we discussed last time about the past and future box, how there's an anagram in the word search that says there are 5 clues in this word search. Obviously, the evidence I just pointed out was a lot more than five kind of solid clues, let's say. That being said, one clue could be all of the regular words that you find in the word search. So then I'm kind of arguing against myself, right? But there weren't like 5 distinct solves, I would say, that all lined up. So that's kind of what makes me hesitant to accept this solution as one I would go boots on the ground for right now.
Yeah. What are your thoughts, Cody?
I'm with you guys. I'll make it a full 0 for 3. Also, I know you both have said it, but I'll repeat it again. She said she has more information than what she's made public. So, I mean, she could be right, obviously, and there could be stuff that does tie it all together. But based off of what we've seen and what's been released, I think, to me, it seems a lot of coincidental stuff. There's a lot of places that are going to have ties to these very, not vague words, but a lot of rail lines, a lot of lemon trees, or places with the word lemon in it. I mean, I know that I've got excited originally in like day 1 and day 2 of working on the puzzle. I got excited about 2 different places that just like had street names that matched like 4 of the words. That could be pretty coincidental. And I also think that there's a little too much, almost like too surface level of hints in that Tahoe solve, where it's like, if I was JCB, would I really put, the state line, also label it state, and then also hide a couple of Tahoes all in that word search? I think I'd probably be, if it really was Tahoe, I think I'd be a little bit more discreet about it, hide it a little more. It almost seems like it's jumping out too much.
Yeah, I would say if this is the solve for those reasons, it would feel pretty underwhelming, I think.
I'd look at the other boxes differently through a different lens if that was the actual solve and there wasn't any more depth to it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, and I don't think that he's giving all this depth and personal background for no reason. Yeah.
All right. So more to come. We'll see if we are proved wrong and it is a Lake Tahoe solve. If it is, as Cody said, it will definitely help us with how to decipher some of the other clues for the other boxes. So a lot is riding on this. Whoever comes up with the first solve, I think that's super exciting. So looking forward to that. All right. Shall we jump into coincidence of the day?
Let's do it.
All right, Cody.
How would you guys like to take some time in this podcast and talk about the commemorative coin?
Okay, excellent. The commemorative coin of the past and future box.
Yeah. The commemorative coins, though, are very. I mean, that's a whole puzzle in itself. So I don't think it's worth. It's not laughing matter.
No, it's not a laughing matter. No, it's just funny that we all picked commemorative coin topics for the same podcast. But we'll get all of our commemorative coin content out.
Let's just act like it was intentional. So it's all a common theme of the podcast.
Yeah, we'll title this one the commemorative coin special holiday episode.
Let's just save discussion of chapter 2 for later.
Oh, this will be a pretty quick one, I think. So we'll expand a little bit on the coins. So there's, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, there's either 4 or 5 coins. I know that there's a coin in each of the 4 smaller treasures. I don't know if there's a coin in the bigger one. I can't remember. Do you guys know?
I'm not sure.
Okay. I actually can't remember either.
Yeah.
So there's at least 4 commemorative coins. There's 1 in each of the small boxes. And there's pictures of each of those commemorative coins in the book. And they all look very similar. They're all a coin that's, I don't know, probably a little bit bigger than a $50. Looks like a pretty hefty coin. And they've all got, it looks like just angles of different degrees. And then kind of a circle where that angle meets. So very cryptic. Yeah, very cryptic.
So some speculation that all 4 coins help you lead, are some clue towards the lion's share treasure. I've seen that floated about.
Yeah. And that's why I paused there, because I was just about to say that, but I'm
I'm
going to
sorry.
cover that at the end. You gave it away.
Sorry.
If you want to pull that picture back up, Blake, if you have
Sure.
that on hand.
No problem.
My coincidence of the day also relates back to not only the commemorative coin we've been talking about, but yesterday's episode, or our last episode, where I was talking about the possible use of binary somehow in that word search. So I was actually looking at this photo that Brent sent, and I was thinking, hey, let's line them up so they're actually on top of each other instead of just looking at the angle. Look at the coin overlaid with the coin, or the Bitcoin overlaid with the commemorative coin. And if you do that, the 2 points, those 2 lines, the top one points to the I in silver, and the bottom one points to the O in Bitcoin. And the way that silver is the font of that silver makes me think it could potentially be a 1 and a 0. And that got me a little bit reinvigorated about the binary option, given that those 2 things were right next to the were pictured in the book, right next to the, I've got to say crossword, the word search.
Very good. Very good.
But ultimately, after thinking about it a little bit, I think I'm landing on the idea that this is just a coincidence, even though I got really excited about it because I had binary right on the front of my mind when it came up. But I'm going to call it a coincidence for now because as I talked about in the last episode, I did a lot of work on the binary and just couldn't come up with anything. I really love that idea. I'm married to that idea. I want someone to prove me wrong and show that is right. The ultimate confirmation bias is when you got confirmation bias of an idea that you haven't even gotten anything back on yet. And then like Blake just mentioned, the other reason I'm kind of calling it a coincidence or classifying it in my own mind as a coincidence is because there's the idea floated around that all 4 of those coins, either they work kind of in conjunction with each other or they each do the same thing, which I think would make sense because they're all so similar. And it doesn't look like for any of the other, at least 3 commemorative coins, that there's anything jumping out that would be like a similar overlay on another circle that would give you any sort of information, at least not that I've seen. So I'm tabling that one for now and calling that the coincidence of the day.
All right. Excellent. Any questions, Bryn, about that? Comments?
It was a good one. We got ourselves worked up about the coin and the overlay while you were at work, and yeah, it was exciting while it lasted.
Bombarded Blake with texts and pictures of crudely cropped overlays of the circles.
Shot down. Sorry.
That
was just my gut reaction. Yeah. All right. Shall we jump into the topic of the day at hand, which is chapter 2? You guys ready for that?
Yeah, let's get into
the meat and potatoes of the episode.
All right. So yeah, we're going to be covering chapter 2 of the There's Treasure Inside book. It's titled The 100 Gold Rings of Tuyget Nguyet. The subheading is written, Don't Wing It. Don't Wing It. And there's 2 quotes associated with that. It usually takes me more than 3 weeks to prepare a good impromptu speech. Mark Twain. It's better to look ahead and prepare than look back and regret. Jackie Joyner Kersey. All right. Who wants to kick us off with a summary? And we'll all fill in here, obviously, because this was more complex chapter. It's a little bit longer, I'd say.
More jumping around in the narrative, for sure. A lot of different kind of stories all mushed together.
Yeah. Trying to understand why the stories that were selected why they were selected is kind of probably one point of discussion for today.
Yeah. Wait, should I start out with the JCB's connection, his little intro to the section?
Yeah, that'd be great.
So Yeah, essentially he kind of kicked off the chapter by saying like, he took all these electives in college. He didn't necessarily have like a plan for what he was going to do professionally after school. And so as graduation loomed, he figured out, well, I better decide what I want to do when I graduate from college. So he just looked up like what's the most high paying job that I can get. Ultimately, he decided that was going to be sales. So he kind of shopped around for a sales job, found a company that seemed to resonate with him, interviewed, and got a job in sales. Found out pretty quickly sales was not going to be his thing. But he thought that the orientation speech that he had received when he joined the company was something that he thought he would be good at and could be interested in. So he uh, basically approached the training coordinator, whoever it was, and asked if he could lead one of the training sessions. And basically, that person said, "Sure, lead the training session tonight." If I'm remembering correctly,
That's
stop me
right.
at any
Yeah.
point if I'm speaking incorrectly. So, yeah, he was tasked with doing the next orientation, and essentially went in kind of winging it. He had a little bit of a plan, but nothing too solidified, hadn't rehearsed it, wasn't ultimately prepared. And I guess as part of this orientation, there's a demo, sales demo. He was demonstrating what you'd be doing in this role.
Yeah, it was
And
like a water
asked,
filter. So it was a demonstration that the water filter removed chlorine from the tap water.
yeah, and so there was like an actual visual indication, color change that this had successfully happened and the product worked. So he had identified someone he thought that looked like, a friendly individual in the crowd as he started his presentation. And so when it came time to get the audience involved, he went and asked this older gentleman if he could identify physically, visually identify the change on this chart or whatever he was showing. And the man kept saying, no, I'm sorry, I can't. And ultimately, the wife said, my husband is blind. He cannot see. He cannot see this visual change. And so that's kind of the end of his story of how he was unprepared and just ultimately ended up in this very embarrassing situation. He kind of blacked out, doesn't remember what ultimately became of that meeting, which fair enough. That's a horrible situation to be in. Um, yeah, so that was kind of his personal connection to the theme of preparation in this chapter.
Yeah, then it kind of gets into, let me see here. He mentions that he has a recurring dream slash nightmare about that particular scenario, and it's always a little bit different. But that's a recurring dream that he has, and that always when he has that dream, it reminds him that he needs to be prepared, and so that's kind of one of the overarching lessons. Don't wing it, be prepared, and so that's one piece of information he's trying to convey in this chapter. And again, all the chapters should be teaching you lessons of how to find treasure generally and find the treasures associated with the book. There's a lot more content to this. That was just part one.
Yeah, just
um,
the
he then goes and talks a little bit about the actual content of the treasure, which the chapter title again is called the 100 gold rings of uh, Tuyget Nguyet. And so there's I think a dozen. So there's 12 of the rings from Tuyget Nguyet's collection that are in across the boxes of the treasure, most likely across the different treasure boxes. And then there's also like a gold box, I think, for one of the rings as well. So that's kind of the treasure that's associated with this chapter. And Tuyget Nguyet is a Vietnamese, initially a reporter, news reporter, that eventually kind of got into the art world and actually started a publication called The Arts of Asia, which was kind of the no pun intended, the gold standard of Asian art, for the world, let's say. So a lot of museums, use the Arts of Asia publication as kind of one of their main reference materials. So she became very famous for that, and anyway, 100 rings. JCB was able to get 12 of them for the treasure hunt. So there's some discourse about Tuyget Nguyet's life and kind of contribution to the art world. And then he kind of dives into, JCB kind of dives into the religious meaning of these rings, which were acquired from what's estimated to be, I think, as early as 200 BC or 300 BC up until my guess is around the 1400s or 1500s. So it's a wide range of this 100 ring collection of times that those were made in history. And so then he dives into kind of the religious meaning. It's not necessarily clear for all of these rings, like the exact dates on whether they were Hindu or Buddhist rings. And so he does, dive into kind of some religious background on what gold's meaning was in Hinduism and what gold's meaning was in Buddhism. And he talks about one ring in particular that has like a lotus pattern on it and what the meaning of lotus was in both of those religions. Anybody remember kind of what happens after the religious part of this chapter? I think he starts talking about Angkor, and I apologize.
Angkor Wat.
Yeah, I don't know Angkor. So Angkor Wat is kind of that very famous lost city in Asia that, Raiders of the Lost Ark. There's a couple other movies that, use that as either a film site or inspiration for filming of what a lost city is. And so going back to the theme of the chapter, he talks about, how large Angkor is in terms of, I think, the same size footprint as Los Angeles.
3 times the footprint of the Vatican City.
Yeah. And how much planning had to take place in order to generate all the architecture and all of the details that are built into how that city was designed. There's another sidebar which goes into the Champa invasion. So the Champa were a group of people that lived somewhere in the vicinity of Angkor that were super resilient. So all of the kind of other surrounding peoples in that area all eventually kind of got conquered by Angkor because it was such a powerful society. But the Champa people were able to resist that for quite a long time. Angkor eventually was able to invade, I think, for a short period of time, Champa, and then left after, I think it was a couple days or a couple weeks. I can't remember, or maybe years. I apologize. I don't remember.
I thought it was a couple years, but I'm not.
Couple years. Okay, a couple years. Yeah, we're talking.
It was short in terms of those kind of time frames.
And then a year later, Champa actually invaded and was able to take over Angkor. And so again, that he kind of relates that back to the preparation that the Champa people had in terms of being able to successfully take over a much more powerful nation during that time period. And then I think there's one more part of this that I can't remember. Let me look it up in the book. I don't know if you guys can save me here. I feel like there was one more vignette about those ancient peoples as well. Champa, Khmer. Oh yeah, I think it was the Khmers also were able to eventually take over Angkor as well. And then Angkor eventually was abandoned in the 1400s because of some severe flooding and rains and climate change that was caused the city to be not desirable anymore. So then it kind of grew up with jungle and became a lost city. I think the third one I was thinking about is for Tuyget Nguyet and her, dedication to collecting this collection of 100 rings over, I think, a 50-year time period, and the planning that went into that and the preparation based on her expertise. So that's a rough outline of this complex chapter, let's say.
I appreciate that summary. It definitely jumps around a little bit. And I told Cody it can feel a little disconnected. So I think you did a good job bringing it together and finding common themes. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. That narrative was particularly.
So I guess my main question is, I know I was trying to figure this out while I was reading it, is how this differs from chapter 1, right? Where we're talking about, I can't remember the exact title. It's the plan that changed the world. It was talking about planning and having a plan. And I mean, this seems very similar to me. Don't wing it. It almost seems identical to me. So trying to tease apart why these are two separate chapters and what maybe the subtle differences in meaning are, I think that might be important. But I wasn't able to at least wrap my brain around what the exact differences are between those two things.
And chapter 3 is going to be know what you're going to do ahead of time.
So maybe all the chapters have the same theme, just explained slightly differently.
It's a book theme, not a chapter theme. That's a good point, though. It's a good question. I hadn't really thought about that. I kind of took it at face value.
Yeah, I was stuck on that as well, Blake, thinking through what is this differentiation outside of like being able to speak to the different treasures themselves. And yeah, maybe that is just simply part of it, to be able to provide two different worlds to speak to those treasures. I do think that this second chapter maybe has a little bit more of an air around like, oh, I don't know. I mean, all the words I want to use are also applicable to chapter 1, but like
a roadmap,
like more like a calm, like a strategy and like a logic versus like maybe chapter 1 being more of like physical locations. Like, I guess I kind of am trying to make that differentiation in my mind, but I'm certainly struggling with what the line is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it does seem like there's a slight differentiation between the idea of having a plan and planning ahead. I guess those are the two takeaways from the first and second chapter.
Yeah, I think the second chapter certainly maybe is a bit more about experience as well as guiding, because of the example he gave where he just tried to wing it with the presentation and had only worked at that company a few weeks, where Tuyget Nguyet had built a whole career around Asian art collection. These large societies have been built over time. How you would apply that to the treasure hunt, though, if it is based on experience, doesn't quite fit the theme that I think he's going for, though. So I kind of argue myself out of that one, but
I mean, it kind of seems like the time required to become an expert plays into it, and I think maybe it kind of is like, well, don't come at this in a hasty way. Like he's said, read the book multiple times, take time with the material. Like you can't go through this one time and immediately think you're an expert and come up with these solves. It's gonna take time to really think it through on a deeper level, versus like initially coming up with just the plan in chapter 1. But this is also now layering on like, acknowledge that you're going to have to put in the time before you can consider yourself an expert.
I like that. I like that concept a lot, actually. Very good. So you're saying we can't just come up with Forrest Fenn Picked Nuggets on the first try?
I mean, I think there's a lot of value in our nugget, but
I think nuggets are great.
we can't take our nuggets at face value. We have to look in those deeper layers of how it's ultimately going to come together.
Okay. Cool. Any other parting thoughts before we get into Forrest Fenn's Picked Nuggets? I think there is one note. It's kind of a really obvious is probably not quite the right word, but there are some typos with the spelling of Tuyget Nguyet's name, and it's inconsistently spelled across the chapter. I think Cody, you said that's been addressed by JCB, that is a typo. That's not on purpose. Is that correct?
I believe so. Yeah, I think so. I'll double check too, and I'll report back if it's not. But I'm pretty sure I saw that it was.
Yeah, yes. Yesterday on his website, I saw he yes, it says across certain multiple pages, I think, or something along those lines. He regrettably misspelled her name, so confirmed.
All right. Cool. So yeah, that was. I think we're all in agreement that was a little bit more complex chapter, a little bit more disparate in terms of the pivots that the storytelling took. Not quite sure what to make of that yet. I mean, we'll see how the other chapters line up in terms of consistency, right? I don't think there was particularly egregious use of images in this one. It's just all images of the rings, I believe, and so there wasn't kind of a random picture like you found, and one picture of Angkor Wat as well. But yeah, it was mostly focused on the rings here.
And I will say that even though the narrative did seem, kind of broken up and like segmented, they do kind of all seem to have their purpose. He does that initial introduction about his sales pitch. That's obviously tying into the have a plan, don't wing it situation. And then both the Tuyget Nguyet and all the Angkor Wat and that area is all related specifically to the rings, right? So while it is broken up, you can see why he wanted to include each of those things in this chapter under the 100 gold rings heading,
Yeah. Yep. So
and he does speak to more than one ring too. So I mean, if
that's
we're
true too, yeah.
gonna have that many included.
Yeah, I'm assuming there was a wealth of information associated with having a collection of 12 rings, and he probably just had to pick and choose some vignettes to highlight in the chapter. Otherwise, you could write a whole book about probably these 12 rings, right? All right, nugget time.
Yes.
What are FFPNs?
FFPNs.
Forrest Fenn Picked Nuggets. And just to reiterate, these are phrases or concepts in the chapter that we think are suspicious, raised an eyebrow, we think might be related to a clue that we're thinking JCB has inserted into this chapter. Again, we have not revealed our nuggets to each other yet, so it's going to be a surprise if we all land on the same one or not. Let's see how it goes. Who wants to start today? I'm so excited. This is my favorite part of the podcast.
It's my favorite part too.
So we save it to the end.
I went first last time, so one of you needs to go.
Okay. Cody, I nominate you. Sorry.
All right. I sigh because I have to once again admit that I cannot follow directions and I did not pick one. I have two.
That's right. Start with one, and we'll do one, and then we can go back and talk about our backups.
Okay. And I like my second one way more, but if I had to only pick one, that's like
you have too many just jump into
one. About the caveats. It's important.
Too many disclaimers. You got to pick a nugget and go.
I like my second one a lot more, but I think if I had to just pick one, I just have to do this first one because it's so obvious in my mind, at least.
Okay.
Even though I like the second one better. If I had to pick one, the obvious one is a blue lotus indicates that knowledge and wisdom have conjoined to prepare a path to enlightenment where secrets are revealed. I think anytime that you are writing a book where there's hidden clues and you're trying to point someone in a direction, if you end a sentence with where secrets are revealed, it's going to jump off the page, right? So I don't really have much more to talk about on that sentence that I pulled out, but if you're asking me to pull out one, that pick one, Forrest Fenn Picked Nugget that jumps off the page to me, that's the one.
Okay, very good. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's not in
that
my.
was my option B.
Okay.
So
I
many
guess
caveats.
the only other, I wasn't gonna use it. I just had it as an option B. Um, and I don't know, maybe you guys can tell me if I'm just making this up. But I feel like there's a lot of reference, and maybe this is just the nature of treasure. There's a lot of reference throughout the book to colors.
Mm.
And I guess I'm trying to piece together how that's going to ultimately play into things, and like it just could be like this is how we're describing these things. They are beautiful. We're going to talk about color,
Hmm.
but it just seems like there's a lot of color used in description. So when I saw Blue Lotus, I don't know, that stuck out to me that way as well.
That's not your nugget though.
No, that is not my nugget. My
Oh,
nugget, my nugget. So I have a quote. It is this is talking about Angkor Wat, or I guess just Angkor. Every stone, every statue, and every archway were measured and angled with a specific intent. All corners of Angkor were mapped out and designed with a special purpose, which felt like it was speaking very intentionally to like, I mean, the spirit of the hunt and like what he's conveying with creating a plan, but also like very directional and pointed words. I mean, even something like, I know we've been talking about this angle on the coin. That's
Hmm.
like, yes, there's a lot of discussion around angles. He uses specifically the word angle, and then to say uh, the corners mapped out, like to map out the corners, I felt like my initial thought just goes back to like that map overlay that we talked about in the last episode, where it's like you're aligning the corners of the map, even though I'm not like necessarily totally on board with that solution. It just seems like the words that he chose in that quote itself ties into a lot of solved methods or potential solved methods throughout the book.
Yeah, that one definitely caught my eye. It's not on my list because I wanted to avoid it because I felt like the word search has tainted me basically to thinking about all the angles and looking at that
Hmm.
grid all the time. So I purposely avoided that because I didn't want to do confirmation bias, but that one did catch my eye. So that's a really good find. I like that one a lot. All right, you guys
All right,
ready for
Blake,
my nugget?
I'm excited.
So
Yes.
my nugget maybe is too surface level. I'm not sure. Maybe it's a coincidence of the day, but I found the instance of the number 36, one in kind of an innocuous position, talking about the age of Tuyet Nguyet, when she started at the age of 36, started the Arts of Asia publication. And then at the end of the chapter, I thought there was a more odd reference to 36. Let me see if I can find the exact quote, sorry. But it was talking
I
about
think
a 36,000 foot view. And that seemed odd to me because I usually think of it as a 30,000 foot view.
me too. Oh my gosh. And it's so
yes.
funny that you say that now because I remember reading it and going, what? What? Isn't it 30,000 foot view? And then not thinking about it beyond that. Just,
Right.
I
And
thought I
so
must be wrong.
so I found that odd, that 36,000 foot view, and then also the only mention of age besides dates and things like that was that he said 36-year-old, that 36 years old Tuyet Nguyet, started that publication. So anyway, I tried to
Well, and
debunk
how
it a little bit. Yeah, go ahead.
I would say this chapter also spans over the page 36. So
I
page
was going to ask
36
that. Yeah.
Page 36 also shows one of the gold rings. So the quote that you were speaking to, Blake, is on page 37. So
Yeah,
yeah, adjacent to it.
adjacent to page 36. I did not pick up on that, so that's a good find. I tried to debunk it and just Googled, 36,000 foot view, and I can't tell if it's common or not, 36,000 foot is kind of a typical cruising altitude for an airplane. And so there was some instances of 36,000 foot view being used, at least on the internet. So I think I need to do a little bit more digging to see how common I actually think that is, and if that's a commonly used phrase, at least in the aviation hobby or industry. So anyway, take that one with a grain of salt, but that was the nugget that caught my eye the most, I would say, in this chapter.
Yeah.
I do like that. That's a good point.
Double down with the page number. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that I thought, you mentioned it's so far, at least, I mean, over 2 chapters in, been kind of rare for him to mention an age, and it seems strange for him to throw it in there. My thought was that it seems like a remarkably young age to start your own publication, and that would be why it would be notable.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's worth going back to chapter 1, and as you said, looking through the rest of the book to see how often ages are brought up. But
yeah,
I didn't think about that, but you're right. That might be notable for that reason.
it's definitely a good point, though. Yeah, it's so funny. It's so funny that I read that and thought, that's weird. I must be wrong, and I just never wrote it down.
I mean, I would argue that that's not as bad as me just bypassing the Star Wars or Star Trek picture in chapter 1 with no second thought. So
I'm glad the 3 of us are working together, because
that's why we gotta work together.
My second picked nugget that I had alluded to actually was the exact same thing that Bryn just talked about, which is why I got so excited when she brought it up about the how he is very specific about mentioning the Angkor Wat geometry and symmetry, because I know that geometry and symmetry are things that we've been exploring in a number of different solves, even I think outside of the word search. And I did some looking into that, and I haven't done enough looking into it yet, but it's definitely something worth looking at. There's very distinct geometry and very intentional. Any of the articles I've read about it make it sound like we think that they were very intentional on and pre-planned, I guess. It's a good segue back to that. Not segue, but they pre-planned
Callback.
exactly what they wanted to. Callback. There we go. Did they pre-plan?
Good teamwork. Good teamwork, everyone.
They pre-planned the city or the structure, the whatever it is, ahead of time. We were very intentional about that geometry for a number of different reasons, and so it'll be interesting to see if we can find any use for that or reference for that as we're looking at clues in the future. I also found it interesting in doing just a little bit of research on it, the timing, because I have not had a chance to read a lot of articles, but I've looked at it enough to know that there's been some kind of, I don't even call them discoveries, but a lot more, I guess they're discoveries, and a lot more information about that area between, don't quote me on this, but it sounds like between like 2010-ish and 2015-ish, with ground penetrating radar. And so they've discovered some new stuff. And I think that kind of the timing of, I'm sure if he got these rings, went to research it, and there's all this kind of new interesting information, that could be something that he's kind of drawing on to create hints and stuff, and it'd be something interesting in the news. And then another kind of quote that I wrote down when I was doing my research, and this is not at all related to the book, but something that's it came up a couple times as I was researching some Angkor Wat stuff, is they kept saying that in order to appreciate Angkor Wat, you either have to be really far away from it or really close to it. And really far away from it because it's just such a huge structure that in order to see it, you have to be really far away. Or there's like such intricate carvings up on it that you got to be really close and looking at those. And it kind of just sparked something in me thinking back to kind of this whole treasure hunt as a whole, that it's so easy to get close and you need to be close. And it's so easy to pull back. And sometimes you need to pull back and kind of look at the treasure hunt as a whole and all of these, very specific things up close. You need to kind of balance both of those. So again, that's not at all related to the book, but it's something that my own little takeaway.
What about viewing it from 36,000 feet? How about that?
Are we going to go boots on the ground at 36,000 feet? Speaking of, I've had a coffee table book for like 15 years. It's like this travel book, and the #1 rated one out of every place in the world is Angkor Wat.
Yeah.
So I've known about it for like 15 years, and it's funny to see it pop up again right at chapter 2 in this treasure hunt.
Excellent.
And a great place to go boots on the ground if you want to. Best tourist attraction in the world, according to a 15-year-old coffee table book.
That was before the ground penetrating radar.
It was. Now it's even better.
Yeah.
I think we might possibly overlooking some basic parameters of the search, unfortunately.
You can still go boots on the ground to find clues. It doesn't have to be buried there, or not buried. He says it's not buried, right? So
Hidden.
hidden.
All right.
Well, I feel much more connected to the chapter after our discussion. I feel like I can take away a lot more applicable information as we proceed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was super helpful to have that discussion, actually. Very helpful. Thank you. All right. Shall we wrap up this episode? We're going a little long.
Yeah, I think that covers all my topics. Cody
Right.
had too many nuggets.
Too many nuggets. I got more stuff I want to talk about. I'll save some of it for the next one.
All right. We'll have episode 2.5, chapter 2.5 to talk about more nuggets. No, I guess we can come back to them later once we get through the whole book. But yeah, plenty of content in that chapter. That was interesting. So, all right. If you guys, audience has tips, thanks for tuning in. Make sure you hit the subscribe button on your podcast feed or on the YouTube channel. If you have comments or tips or points you want to bring up on anything we discussed today or anything related to the treasure, we do have a email address that's listed below. It's tips.ttiunofficialpodcast@gmail.com. Other than that, thanks Cody, thanks Bryn for the good discussion today, and we will call it a night. Good night, treasure hunters.
Searching for clues, let's find you.